So, we talk a lot about Nan's journey, living in a facility, moving there, what that looked like, and kind of the ups and downs. And, we've really been able to tell that from the family perspective, which I think, as most people's experiences, they are the family of the loved one. With any story, there's two sides. And so it's not very often that you get to sit down with the administration and see kind of that side of it. So my name's Cortney, and I'm here with my mom, Julie, and we're here with the Hey Woman podcast, which is dedicated to my Nan, who we affectionately called Woman. And we're here to talk about real conversations on caregiving, life, legacy, the grief journey. And today I am really excited because we have a special guest, Jasmyn Winey, who is the elder care navigator at Steinbacher Goodall and Yurchak. But prior to that, was the administrator at Nippenose Valley Village when Nan moved in.
Yes, I was.
And so we're here today to kind of talk about what those, the ups, the downs, and kind of what that journey looked like from your perspective, our perspective. But also you've had this great experience also at the village, at other places. And so to kind of talk a little bit about that too, and share some advice for our listeners who are thinking about putting their loved one in a facility and, how to make those first couple of days better. Because at the end of the day, it's change, and change is hard, even if it's the right decision.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I wanted to start off with a story of when I first met your Nan.
Oh.
I was working at your mom's law firm, and I had just started. And she showed up and she said, "We're going to go look for your chair." I'm like, "What?" So apparently, I don't know if it's a thing, but everybody got to go out and pick their chair. So she was tasked with taking me, and she was driving a very large Cadillac Escalade at the time.
And she's a little woman, for those of you guys.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay. And I was very young at the time, and I had just started there. And we got there, and she hit something in the parking lot.
And I'm sure it was that thing's fault.
Yeah. So that was my very first experience with her as my boss's mother. Don't tell Julie. And that became actually a theme of a lot of things. Don't tell Julie. So.
It's funny, and I'm sure like the thing was the bad thing.
Yes.
That's funny. Oh. You probably didn't need that chair that bad. Well, before we jump in too far, why don't you share with our listeners some of your background besides, because there's been a couple of times if you worked for businesses that I've owned, but you've also worked other places. And I think it's helpful for them to hear that because that's, going to orient the conversation and, what tips and help we can give them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out as a social worker, and then I went to work for your law firm. When nonprofits in the state were starting to not get funded, I was kind of tired of getting laid off or not getting paid. So I worked my way into your law firm and ended up really working with marketing and kind of the coaching group at that point in time. And we talk about Colby's, and I'm a high fact finder. So I learned everything I could to do my job well was what I did. And I worked.
Courtney can appreciate that.
I'm also a high fact finder.
Yes. So I did that, and really the coaching group was amazing to work for, and I learned a lot at that point in time. And then you had asked me if I'd be interested in running the facility you were starting because of my social work background. And I did that for 5 years, and I absolutely loved it. And then I went on from there, and I worked for a corporate personal care home and also a corporate skilled nursing facility before I found my way back to you. So I did admissions in both the other personal care home and the skilled nursing facility. So I got a lot of experience with insurances, partnering with the caregivers, making sure people were getting the best care that they needed, because that's important to me.
Yeah, and of course, those like first 90 days of not just my mom, but of anybody, moving from their home into any type of community facility living is hard.
It definitely is. And COVID happened during the time that we were I was running the facility and your mom was there, which was even harder at that point. I became a med tech. I worked the floors, second shift almost every other weekend and in the evenings and stuff. So I was really there a lot, and went through a lot of struggles with all of our residents during COVID.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that, COVID reminded us that, community living at times, what we could do for our residents depending on what the state allowed.
Yeah,
And I think, that's why still many people have a kind of bent towards, I want to stay in my home.
right.
And that's not that that's a bad decision, but it's not a perfect decision either.
No, it's not. And in my role recently as an elder care coordinator, I have really been finding a lot of people who isolated themselves at home and they're still at home and they are struggling and they don't want to leave because they've heard of terrible things that happened, in skilled facilities. And honestly, I think we heard of the bad things, but there were so many places that did really well that you didn't hear about. And Nipponos was one of them. We didn't have a case for a year and a half.
Yes.
So that was...
We were able to make the decision not to have any new admits for a while. So, and really were diligent about when people would go out of the facility and back in.
Yeah. So, we talk about your mom moving in to the facility, and she was really an independent person. She was her own person. So that was definitely hard for her. And she was the owner's mom.
Yes.
So that was also hard. And she also worked there a little bit at the beginning too for me.
Yes.
So she very much wanted to be a part of it. She, it was where she lived, so she had opinions on decorations and she had opinions on food and should we listen to music during mealtime and why wasn't I doing this and why wasn't I doing that? So,
and I think she saw herself like as an advocate for the other residents.
She did.
Like
She
I think
really
some of
did.
it was about what she wanted, but she also kind of defined herself as by like, I'm gonna fight with Jasmyn so we all get what we want.
When Cortney asked me to be on here, I had to laugh. I'm like, she had a love-hate relationship with me.
I remember coming home once to visit, and you had sent out to all the residents like the new rules and regulations, and that was like her personal list of buttons to push for you.
Yes.
She was like, she read it to me, and she's like, "Well, I'm not doing that." And I'm like, "Oh my God, can you?" I was like, "You don't even want to not do that," and she's like, "Well," I said, I forget what was even on the list that you said she couldn't do, and I was like, "Woman, you don't even want to do that," and she's like, "Well, now they told me I can't, so I'm gonna." And I'm like, "Oh, good."
And it was her on one side of the building and my grandmother actually on the other, and they both felt the same way. I was like, we're just gonna start a little I hate Jasmyn fan club.
Yeah, it's funny. Although she also did love you. I mean, if her TV wasn't working and you could fix her TV, I always would feel bad. It's like, okay, so the administrator at the facility is in fixing my mom's TV now while I'm, in Texas or something.
And honestly, so a lot of times I would call Cortney because she'd be in a bad mood, and I'm like, I'm just calling Cortney. Or if she'd be mad at me, I'd redirect her by asking about one of the grandkids because
that was helpful. Yeah.
Well, no, it's funny. On your phone, you can list people that come through if it's if your phone's on Do Not Disturb. And my list was very small at that time. It was Mom and you, because I knew if you were calling, Nan was yelling.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Don't worry. That went over into and we laugh about this, but giving up independence is hard.
It is really hard.
And at the end of the day, I think she lived through so many things and was able to fight back through so many things because of this, because of this tenacity that she had, and just kind of the way she ruled the world. But so we laugh about it, but I just want everybody to know it's also something that we respect. And but living it day to day, and those of you who are listening who are living this day to day, it's not easy. It's not easy to have somebody who's going to just sit and push your buttons.
It's also not easy, I'm sure, if the administrator or somebody is calling and saying that your loved one is, experiencing some, behaviors or difficulties, those can be
Yeah.
hard phone calls. And so as a loved one, like just because they don't experience them with you, so like Nan would have never said to me like things that she said to you, which is why you called me, because you knew that it would be, we were able to navigate that together.
Right.
And so it's not a one size fits all. And it's not that, and I think, sometimes families jump to, well, the facility is bad. That's not true. Like, some of it was her pushing envelopes to see what she could and what she could get away with, just like a little kid, right? Like
Yeah.
redefining boundaries, because she moved from her house into a new place and she needed to reestablish what the boundary was. And the only way she knew how to do that was to push them and see who pushed back.
Right. And so we were talking about the don't tell Julie. So she would have a fall and I would be there because I went to check on all my residents and I was don't tell Julie.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I'm doing when I'm getting back to my office is texting you. Yeah, because I'm not keeping that. And that's, that's protocol for any family. We do keep in touch with them. But yeah, it's so hard when somebody moves into a facility. And I try to go along with the assessments and I give the family suggestions. So some people, I suggest you need to stay away for a month because they need to acclimate to this, especially if there's somebody with dementia. But staying away is hard for a family member. And we'll call with updates. And I know families, it's hard because you're not hearing anything, and you're on that side. Whereas we're calling 40 families with updates. So it might take, the whole week to get to you, but among other things. So,
and I think, one of the things that has to happen is that the families have to understand that whatever facility their loved ones in, whatever community, that the people that work there have been through this before.
yes.
And so rather than, it's hard because sometimes I think families are fighting against the administration because they're trying to show that their advocacy for their loved one. But sometimes I think that's misplaced. Rather, they should really listen to what the administration, whether that's a social worker, admissions person, administrator is saying, and, try to think about, well, what can I learn from them and kind of align myself with them. To advocate for my loved one, not to say, no, I don't believe you, but to advocate for my loved one so that, you're all kind of moving together versus this kind of, butting heads against each other.
You're absolutely right. It's very difficult. So I recently covered back at Nipponos Valley Village for a little bit. And we had one family who their loved one kept falling. And I said, look, she has to go to rehab, and they didn't want it. And I said, this is our only option because at this point, the state's going to come in and say, what are you doing for them?
Right.
So a lot of families also don't understand we've got state guidelines and it's really only for the best for people too. But we care. So, families don't want to overburden mom. Well, honestly, bringing in therapy, not sending them to a skilled rehab facility is better. It's much more gentler on the person. Occupational therapy helps them with where they're living versus just in a gym at a skilled nursing facility. So it is definitely better when the family works with us rather than feels like they're fighting.
And I would encourage people, you definitely do want your loved one to, have those special things that they love. But, really kind of watch, somebody's very diabetic and you bring in all this sugar, that's not helpful. And particularly if it's hidden from the staff, I think, having a conversation about that and maybe finding a happy medium between that. So at least, if I'm going to bring those donuts in, maybe we would only give half at a time and have the nursing staff know that so they're not wondering why this person's blood sugar is totally out of whack right now. Or the person themselves sits and eats 3 donuts rather than just having that half. So it may be that you have to advocate, no, I want my loved one to have a half a donut, not no donuts. So there's some happy mediums in there. And I think that when people get very antagonistic with each other and start keeping secrets, that doesn't help anybody.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't at all. And families, they're grieving that their loved one is not the person they were anymore, which is hard. And so, yes, they're advocating, well, why can't they have what they want? Or why are their legs so big? And it's because you're bringing in chips. You're bringing in all this candy.
Lots of salt.
Yeah, we need to take this with a grain of salt. When you talk about salt, I had a family who would bring mom donuts every time they came to see her. And I finally had to show them the salt content. They didn't think there was any salt in a donut. You know, you're coming at us for all the food that you think we're giving her with salt that we're not. But and it's only, you know, their best intentions they want to you know, give them. So yeah, we do have to come up with a happy medium. And you know, there's things called pleasure foods. There's palliative care. There's different options for, you know, different disease processes and
Yeah, and I think just to make sure everybody's on the same page, it could be that your loved one's in a place where, you know, we don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Like where we're just going to go ahead and eat the donuts, or we're just going to go and do whatever. But I think you have to understand that we have to understand that we're all in that situation, and that's really what our loved one wants. Not just that we're ignoring it or not understanding the consequences of the action.
And I think I've grown since I first started there in more understanding that and not being a fighter or an advocate, more like let's come to a happy medium and figure this out for the person.
Well, it's hard. It's hard to
is.
do that because, you know, often people are coming at you and can even personally attack. So that's really, really hard. Also, you know, to be honest with you, in all communities, they're not perfect.
No.
So if somebody wants something to find something to complain about, they're likely to be able to do it.
They are. Yeah.
Yeah, they're likely to be able to do it. So they can be right. Like, well, you know, this person didn't do this right. Well, that's probably true. Doesn't change the overall, you know, look of everything.
No. And people want to advocate, again, for their loved one. And a lot of times it's the resident who declines. You know, I don't want to shower today. I don't want this. I don't want that. But they're not telling their family member that.
Right.
So that's another thing.
Well, you know, and you know, rightly, maybe they don't have to. But they certainly sometimes need to, you know, figure out, is what the facility telling me true? And, you know, is it okay that the loved one, you know, skips that for today?
Right.
You know, which is different than skipping it for 10 days.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and I think, you know, nobody's not trying to tell the truth on purpose, right? But the resident could be coloring what's happening. Nan was a master of calling and telling a story to get the outcome that she wanted, depending on who she called.
Yes.
And so, you know, the food was a big one for her.
Yes, it was.
You know, I remember getting a call, and, you know, we did a whole episode about food, but it was important to her. And I remember, you know, she had been there for just a little bit, and she had called and said, you know, they're trying to kill me. She's like, it was not the right temperature. There was too much sugar. And there was nothing wrong with the food. The cook at the village is very good. And so, you know, but maybe the soup wasn't the perfect temperature that she wanted, but they're serving 50 people. Right? The soup's not coming. It's not a 5-star restaurant. And
it's funny though. It did to her. She did advocate.
It really, yeah. You know, garnishes and everything.
She did affect change there.
She really did.
But I think food is important because it's something, you know, we break bread. It's something that's so foundational in our society.
Yeah.
And so it is important. And I know, like, you know, my Aunt Sandy, who's out in California, she was in a facility and she was a vegetarian, and they really were not giving her food that was consistent with being vegetarian and contained protein. Like, you know, so she was really subsisting on not a lot. And, you know, part of that, you know, we had to advocate. And I said to Aunt Sandy, like, you have to kind of talk to them about what are the vegetarian things that you like that also contain protein.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was something that they really needed to do for her.
And I've been at facilities that, you know, they claim that they have gluten-free options. Well, are they cooking with gluten-free option? Like, you have to have certain cookware. And a lot of places aren't. So I would ask to see the kitchen and talk to the cook. You know, people who are are Jewish, there needs to be a separate kitchen. And a lot of facilities don't have that. So there's actually like communities for individuals who are Jewish. So there's a lot of cultural as well as allergic issues too that you have to be aware of.
Food is important.
It is. It is.
And so, I mean, sometimes we would say, like at a residents meeting, if they're only complaining about the food, then we're doing okay. Yet, sometimes that's not true because food is really, really important to them, and that's something that they understand.
And it's really different up in Pennsylvania because we have a strong Pennsylvania Dutch background, and everybody wants food that a lot of the facilities, the corporations are out of like California or Florida, and they want to have a Mediterranean options, and that's not us. So.
Yeah, it's funny. We didn't have that in Mademoiselle Village, but I'm sure, that corporate coming in would be very divergent from what the meat and potatoes of, North Central Pennsylvania. And I think that's important. When we went to, Courtney and I went to the Netherlands and heard Eloy Van Hall, and you also heard him speak here in Lock Haven, and they talked about, when they had the people in facilities, they grouped them by their lifestyles, and so much of it was what were they used to eating, so that when, there was a house of people, those people all were used to eating the same things. Because you're not going to get somebody to eat differently. I know, in trying to like lose weight, that's really hard. And
it is.
Why is it hard? Because I'm trying to choose different foods. And we often slip off that diet game because we go back to our comfort foods and things that we really, really like. And so it is really foundational. For families listening, if you have a loved one, know that you might be able to affect some change. Maybe not everything. You also can think of ways to supplement it or go out around. I know one of the things, when mom was declining, and she really, restrictive lung disease, she used a lot of calories. I could have yelled at like, you have to have my mom, eat more. I didn't, I just made sure that she had her snacks that she loved every night, and I would make sure I would get them out and have some with her. So like peanuts, which were, really good protein, and ice cream. Yeah. I mean, she loved her ice cream and her grapes. And so, that was something that I think it's like this partnership between the facility and the family members that for some of that, it was just something I was going to be more conscious of offering her food when I was there, having her eat more, because she really couldn't eat enough calories in one sitting or two sittings. She couldn't eat that much at one time. She kind of had to eat smaller meals more continuously. And that's something that I chose to kind of take on and say, okay, we're going to make sure that, you are getting these extra calories every night. Not good for my diet,
Right?
but good for hers,
Right?
Or the dog's diet if we brought the dog in, and
Oh yeah, Minnie and Nan would each have an ice cream.
Dogs and babies she loved.
Yeah,
Little
she
kids.
definitely did. Yes.
But I would recommend, going back to the food, bring in some of your loved ones' favorite recipes. Your mom loved Lebanon bologna sandwiches from the Jiffy Market.
She did.
And she would sometimes tell us, Julie said you need to order bag lunches. Like you're and then we started making bagged lunches sometimes because your mom loved them so much, and the residents thought it was cute, and they,
that's funny. Yeah,
So,
see, again, she affected
she really
change. She
did.
did love sweet Lebanon bologna.
She did from the Jiffy Mark. They,
Yeah.
like sliced it the rolls. So for her, the bread was really important.
Okay.
But even like her independence, like I can remember coming home, like when she first moved in there. And again, like it sounds bad, but it got us to where we needed to go. Like she would be like, well, they don't need to know where I'm at.
Yes.
So, but like you did. So like if I was going to take her out for lunch or take her out for a hoagie or something like that, I would just, instead of like going right to her room, I would just stop by and say, hey, I'm taking her out. Oh, and then like I would go get her, and she felt good because nobody knew, like nobody needed to know, right? But it's a safety issue, right?
Right. Yeah, there's always workarounds. She insisted on her mail being in those old school mailboxes. She did not want her mail delivered. Like we do it for everybody. We have to find what what helps and works for them, and what, whatever it is, we try to make them happy.
But I think for families listening too, I think it's about choosing what's like which battles.
The most important. Yeah.
You can't, it's a community. There's other people. There's going to have to be some give and take.
Right.
But I think, pick the things that are most important to your loved one and try to advocate for them.
Right. Absolutely. And, a good facility is going to have not only a resident council, but a family council and really an open door policy and an administrator who's responsive.
Yeah, and that's what everybody should expect.
Yes.
And if you're in that situation, treat those people with respect. Come and talk about what's wrong, but don't be yelling and screaming.
Right.
Really kind of come together as that, like, how can we partner together,
Right.
To give the best care for our individual loved ones' needs.
Yeah.
Because while it's a facility, each person's going on their own journey.
They are.
So, everybody might be eating the same things or they might be doing the same activities, but they're all living their own journey. And I would say to you, like, most facilities, they have the goal of the resident is safe and happy and healthy. And as family, that's really what we want too. And so if you can come back to like, these are our common goals and how do we get those accomplished? You
Right.
have much better conversations.
Right. And I, as an elder care navigator, as an admissions coordinator, I've had to work on that too because, especially in skilled nursing, they don't all look nice and you can only afford so much and you kind of have to say, what are the biggest, most important things for you? Because, this facility has it, this facility doesn't.
Right.
So-
Yeah. And I think the other thing that some people don't realize is that some facilities are better at certain diagnoses.
They really are.
Yeah.
They really are. Like Nip and Nose is excellent with hospice and some facilities do not honor that.
And that's important to know up front.
Yeah.
Because then if you get into that situation, your loved one's going to have to change their setting.
Right. Or some places won't take wheelchairs. That's
Yes.
another.
Some places, too, just so everybody knows, like some places accept animals, some places don't. Some places accept scooters, some places don't. So I would encourage people not to assume that every facility is the same. That's why it is important for people to tour.
Yes.
Ask a lot of questions and make sure that whoever you're talking to, that, that is what's going to happen within that facility.
Absolutely. And as an admissions person, I always hated it. But walking off the street, don't schedule a tour because you're going to get a true picture. Because those facilities they know when a tour is happening if it's scheduled, and they're going to be tour ready for you. You see what happens when they're not tour ready. So.
Oh, and I know that like people may think that's crazy, but I was a social worker at the nursing home. This was in the 1990s, early 2000s. I was a social worker at a nursing home, and as a social worker, it was my job to go in front of that tour and like make things look nicer.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I was like 20 some years old and that's what I was taught to do. And one of the things I always said to people is, if you're going on a tour, particularly of a nursing home, like look at people's fingernails. Are they clean?
Yes.
Are they very clean? And drop in during mealtime because it is the busiest time.
It really is.
And if they can have time during a meal to talk to their residents and care for them well, they're likely to be able to do that on the off times. But that's where you're going to see, especially that evening meal. You're just going to see a lot of, a lot of chaos and a lot of, people needing different things. And if they can maneuver that, that's probably a good sign.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to say that I think you did well when your mom moved in that I always recommend is bring in as much furniture and decorate it as much as you can beforehand. That's really going to help them settle in. And I really think that was what was helpful for your mom.
I think it was too. Like, and it gave her something to focus on and to build. It's funny when we were moving her stuff, DJ said, does Nan know she only has like 2 rooms? Like, because like she wanted to bring so much stuff. But like I was fully supportive of that, and my husband was like, why are we moving all this stuff? What if she doesn't want to stay? And I'm like, well, then we'll move it back.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like,
Yeah.
But it's not like if you do it kind of halfway, if you don't make it their place. It's funny. I always think about that at my law office. Years ago, I could tell whether or not a young attorney was going to stay or not by whether or not they moved into their office. Like, so like Landon Hodges, who's my law partner now, I remember one Monday I came in and him and his wife, Emily, had like put up all of his pictures and his diplomas. They had like made his office his own. And I was like so happy about that because I was like, oh, they're committed to this.
Yeah.
Like, right. I then right after that moved his office. I haven't done that since. Yeah, I think I think that's such a good idea. A good thought is because when you don't make it their space, it still doesn't feel like home.
Right. And I've had so many residents over the years that I've seen that maybe they didn't have a loved one or they didn't have much stuff. And it's just, they're very sad. They could be angry and they just feel isolated from everything. Whereas if it's their own home and then they can go out and visit people as they want to, it makes it just that much more inviting.
Yeah.
Nan also loved to show people. Like
She did.
Just like this was like her chair and her couch, and this is how they decorated. And she liked to go see how other people decorated their rooms.
She did.
And so it was a conversation starter. Like you're talking about people that are moving in with strangers, and it's a great way to break the ice and start the conversation. And we did move in a bunch of furniture, and we moved some of it back out. She decided that she didn't want it, but that was her decision, and it was on her terms, which is a very different thing than saying, like, we all knew that there was too much furniture in there. Like we did, but that's what she wanted, and she had to kind of live there and settle in for a little bit until she decided that she was taking some of that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I found as, Mom had moved all that stuff in, and for many years she like did her own like decorating for holidays and stuff. But as she declined, that was one of the things that I found most helpful was like redecorating her place for the holidays. And I even did buy some new things for her, and that ended up being a really good activity. So if anybody's like has a loved one, whether they're still at home or in a community, don't think, I know like having to like decorate is one more thing. Yet, like, that's how I visited her. And it really gave her something to talk about, something positive. So it ended up being a much better visit. And in her last year of life, that was, something that she really looked forward to. And then she could show it off to other people, so when the nurses came in, it could make her happy like all day to be like, oh, I noticed that you put this up, or, I noticed this. There was some Halloween stuff and then some Thanksgiving stuff. And then, even for Christmas, and that must have been even the year before she passed. And so I think that sometimes assimilating to a facility can be simpler in some ways because it is the stuff that's around us. It's just so important.
No, absolutely. I also think, I would send pictures and she would put those up, and those are always really great.
Pictures are helpful.
Getting pictures of the family and remembering to update them. But Nan loved, like, when she lived there and people would get like updated senior pictures and she would put them up, like, and then the nurses would come and check on her and she could show off like her new pictures and stuff. I would say, like, never underestimate how exciting just like one or two new pictures can be to put up on the wall. It can really, she would talk about that for weeks.
Yeah, and even today, the photo frames that you can email pictures.
I was just going to mention that there was a resident there at the same time as her, and he had family in Australia, but they could send pictures to those photo frames. He loved to show them off when he went into his room.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for everybody, listening, if you're caregiving, if you're navigating yourself or thinking of, or for your loved one, moving into a facility, that that's something that it can be an good adjustment. If my mom can adjust to it, anybody can.
I really think so. And I think it's the best, because I think when you're at home, it's hard to have 24/7 caregivers, or even 8 hours, because if they call off, then you've got nobody.
Yeah. You're also more dependent on your family. And at the end of the day, living at the Nippenose Valley Village increased my mom's independence because she wasn't dependent on me.
Yes.
So, I mean, obviously it still really helped out, was very much a part of her life, but she could feel like she wasn't as dependent on me. And I think that's a win for many, many people.
It is. And also, not just with your mom, but with, everybody, we're there every day, whereas you can't be there every day.
Right.
And we notice things, your mom, she had her moods, and I could tell what kind of mood she was in by the way her hair looked.
Very true.
But there were days that worried me because I was like, I don't think she's doing well. Her hair's not kept up. Or she'd go to the hairdresser, and I don't know what she'd let the hairdresser do to her, but it looks great, Carol.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Good answer. Yeah. Well, she may have been complaining about that hair person later on to me, like, look what they did to my hair. But no, I think that's funny. Yeah, you do notice the day in and the day out of people.
Well, we thank you for joining and talking to us. Do you have any last minute tips for our listeners who are maybe thinking about moving into a facility or having a loved one make that transition?
I really support facilities. That's the one thing I say. I support touring them and touring multiple ones to get a good feeling of what, where you want them to be, where they want to be. And really making sure that you can have an open communication with the staff there is very important.
I think that's great. I think open communication is so important during this journey, kind of in all facets. So we thank you. And we thank you guys for listening in. If you haven't already, please follow along with us on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook at the Hey Woman Podcast. And if you're looking for an attorney in your area or you're looking for some free resources or different things like that, please go to the planningandprotecting.com website. There's all kinds. We have a caregiver toolkit. We have all kinds of really great resources for you. And we hope that you'll come back and listen to another episode.